Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for coming along this evening to this slightly unusual in-person meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. Obviously, we have all of these plastic screens all over the place, and I think what happened was that the government decided that local authorities had to go back to in-person meetings. However, obviously we still have restrictions about the way that we conduct business. So please bear with us if things seem or slightly unusual. To my right are my fellow councillors, and the five of us will be the people making the decisions on the applications in front of us this evening. To my left are senior officers who will present the reports and also offer us advice, and there are other officers and governance officials sitting down immediately in front of me. If any of them need to speak, then I'll introduce them and explain their role. If we can get underway in that case, excuse me, apologies for absence. Now, I think there are none. Everyone who was intending to sit on this committee is indeed present. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations? Are there any other declarations? Councillor Aretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Item number N56, Leighton House Museum, which is in my ward.
Right. Okay, so that's right. Later in the agenda, Leighton House is in Holland Ward, which is where Councillor Aretti represents. The next item is the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 4th of May. Now, the minutes have been circulated to my colleagues. Do you agree that I can sign those as a record? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, I think it might be helpful if I indicated the order in which we are going to take the applications this evening, just so you can get an idea of where we will be. In a moment or two, we will start with the application for advertising consent on Kensington High Street. We will then move to the application to King's Road, the Little Boltons, Nelgwyn House, Beaufort Mansions, Beaufort Street, Cathcart Road, Caulfield Gardens, Hippodrome Mews, Notting Hill Gate, then moving to Ladbroke Gardens, then Leighton House and Oxford Gardens, and finally Octavia House in Southern Row. So that's going to be the order in which we will consider matters this evening. Okay, so in that case, I think we can move to the first application, which is in the North Pack, and that is relating to advertisement at Kensington High Street. And I think Derek Taylor, Derek, you're going to present this item. Derek, when you're ready, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There we go, I've got the right title slide. So this first application this evening is for advertisement consent. So it's not planning permission, but it's consent to display an advertisement on the shroud, which would cover the scaffolding for the site, which is currently a building site. To illustrate the report, the first drawing I'm showing there is the existing elevation of the building, and it's the building at the centre of the image there, above and behind the Echo sign that you see on the fascia. And then that is what is proposed. So I'll just go backwards so you can see the existing building. Now, what they've shown there for the proposed is basically an image of the proposed building. That is not what is before you. The decision relates to lower down on the building, where you can see, if you look at the red dotted line roughly central to the image, which is actually shaded a blue colour, a sort of greyish blue. So that's the part of the shroud that would cover the whole building, that would be the advertisement. So the advertisement would not cover the whole shroud, it would cover the area sort of central to the building in the red dotted line. That image is taken from Street View. That was actually towards I think the end of last year. You can see there the structure for the scaffold at the front of the building is in the process of being erected. And then the next image I took this morning actually, which shows that the scaffold has now been erected. The sort of imagery on the shroud is what you see there. What you don't see there is the advertising panel, because of course they don't have consent to display any panel at this point. And then with this application, then the advertisement would be central to that image on the lower part of the shroud. And that's the last slide, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions anyone would like to ask? Councillor Bakhtiar at the end there. No.
Is it working? Okay. Now. I only saw one objection, and the objector isn't clear what he wants to say. But my main concern is light pollution. This is big, 10 meters by 6. This is 60 square meters. Who do we have on the other side of the street? Who lives there? Is it commercial building, or is it residential?
Well, I think that there's obviously a lot of residential accommodation along the high streets on upper floor levels. I mean, the illumination of advertisements is always something to be considered, but there are actually conditions relating to that, or precisely 2 conditions relating to that. Condition number 7 actually restricts overnight illumination, so it can't be illuminated all night long. Between midnight and 6 a.m. it can't be illuminated. And then recommended condition number 8 actually sets the illumination limit for it. And with those conditions, the illumination would be basically compatible with other advertisements that you see in the high streets. And I think most importantly, it wouldn't be illuminated during the late hours or early hours, between midnight and 6 a.m.
Councillor Wade.
My only question was, is this a static advertisement?
Yes, it would be a static advertisement.
Because I think there was some concern about whether it would distract drivers.
I mean, so obviously all sorts of moving images could distract drivers. As part of the process of assessing this, we consulted our Transportation and Highways team, and that they were happy with the advertisement in that position. So subject to the conditions, obviously they have to comply with those conditions, but there's no reason to assume, as long as they comply with those conditions, that there would be any distraction to drivers.
Okay. Good, thank you. Any other comments? No. In that case, I think advertisement consent is slightly different from planning permission, because I think, Mr. Taylor, the criteria are rather narrower. So the first is safety, which in a busy road like Kensington High Street would be very difficult. And the other is amenity, I think. And obviously there are a number of large advertisements throughout Kensington High Street. So it's, I think, on that basis, it would be quite difficult to see what could be considered objectionable about this. Is that fair, do you think, in terms of assessment of this?
Yes, I think that's an accurate assessment. Essentially, the advertisement regulations are different to planning permission. There are only those two criteria, safety and visual amenity, that can be considered. I think that this council has traditionally taken, I think it's fair to say, a pretty tough stance against advertisements. And this probably wouldn't be before you being recommended for approval if it was for a permanent advertisement. But I think that the key here is that they're only proposing it for 6 months. And that actually accords with national guidance relating to temporary shroud advertisements.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So colleagues, the recommendation in front of us is to grant the consent. Can I see a show of hands, despite these marvellous perspex screens? Can I see those in favour, please? Okay, so that's granted. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. If we can now move on to consider the application at 109 Kings Road, and I think Fiona Ray, Fiona, that's your application, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
When you're ready.
So planning permission on this application is sought for a new shopfront, as the existing 2 units are to be amalgamated into one. One new residential unit will be created as a result, and there will be a new window proposed to the rear. Some images here just of the application site and showing you its position. It forms part of the Kings Road East Major Centre and part of the Royal Hospital Conservation Area. Importantly, this planning application was granted back in 2016, and there has not been any significant change in policy or circumstance since that time. But here's just an image of the existing shopfront elevation, showing the 2 separate units, and the proposed showing a single shopfront at there, with the residential entrance just to the side on the left. Here's an image of the rear elevation as existing, and the proposed with a new window in the back there. Officers are recommending approval, and I have nothing further to add to the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have some speakers on this application. Can I ask Mr. Hamish Scott, are you, hi, you're here. So when you're ready, can you, you've got up to 3 minutes, please. Yes. Now I'm hoping somebody's going to, Tom.
I think we have lift off. Good.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, jolly good. I'm a resident of Radnor Walk, and I'm here on behalf of the Radnor Walk Residents Association. There are a number of issues which have been highlighted by the residents, which I'll address in turn. The developer wishes to convert 2 retail outlets into a larger single store, the principle in which is not an issue. However, this developer has form. You may know the adjacent building, which is 111 to 115 Kings Road, now Six and Sushi, also owned by the applicant, which was 2 individual retail outlets, and the same owner applied similarly to convert the 2 shops into a much larger single outlet. At the time, we had a Residents' Association meeting, which was held in the Welsh Chapel, which is now St Thomas's School, attended by a representative of the developer, Martin's Properties, who assured us categorically that they had no intention of applying for a restaurant licence. Therefore, we did not object to the initial application. A few months later, a change of use application was submitted for a restaurant, to which the residents objected, and the objection was upheld by the RBKC panel, only to be overturned by an independent appeal. The main argument for the developer at the time was, for the change of use, was for the retail, for the 111 to 115 Kings Road, was based on a extensive report conducted by Savills, which is freely available on the RBKC website. Savills state that they had contacted 200 agents who specialise in the London retail market. The findings of the report were twofold. Firstly, that the main response from the retail community was that a larger retail store is more challenging with extra staff and fit-out costs associated with the site. And secondly, the retail unit is positioned away from the accepted prime shopping area, being Sloane Square and the Duke of York Square. Retailers have felt that the site is too challenging and risky to commit with the current environment. That was the Savills report. Therefore, the question begs, why do Martin's Properties or their agents suddenly think that the retail community has completely changed their view and would now like a larger retail outlet away from, and I quote, the prime pitch of Sloane Square? Basically, this contradicts our own findings. I asked a question at the appeal as to why Savills had not carried out their research before the building was converted from 2 shops into a larger one, because they would have found that there were very few, if any, potential tenants. As we all well know, Kings Road has developed into an had developed into an iconic status over the many decades, dating back from the 50s and 60s, famed for its boutique shops and fashion. Unfortunately, much of the vogue has disappeared and is replaced by a stream of coffee shops and eateries, primarily due to the avarice of landlords seeking ever higher rents and punitive taxes. Reducing the number of retail outlets only will further compound the demise of Kings Road as a shopping experience, and as only the main brands found on the high street across the country will be able to afford such a space.
Okay.
Even still...
I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm
Okay,
afraid.
well, I just
Time
finished now. Is our belief that the landlord will apply for a change of use to a restaurant if the application is successful?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, we have a speaker representing, I think, an agent for the applicant, Mr. Considine. Sir, so in a similar fashion, when you're ready, you've got up to 3 minutes as well. Please, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak, and I'd just like to draw attention to a few elements, most of which are already covered in the officer report. So this is as much for emphasis as anything. As acknowledged, the application comprises the amalgamation of 2 retail units, external alterations and a new rear window. The alterations include allowing independent access to the residential unit and facilitate the amalgamation of the 2 retail units. This is substantially the same as that approved in 2016. It is not a renewal as that application has lapsed. However, that consent is a material consideration. The external alterations in themselves improve the shopfront, self-contain the residential unit, provide inclusive access, and in themselves amount to an improvement on the existing situation in this Kings Road site, clearly in accordance with policy CV15. The amalgamation of the 2 retail units is not in itself development as acknowledged in the officer report and in the previous officer report in 2016. However, again, as acknowledged in the officer report, this amalgamation is consistent with the aims and objectives of policy CV15 and not in conflict with policy CF2, and it will result in a more flexible and sustainable unit. Future changes are not considered as part of this application. Where planning consent is required, they will be considered at that point, and where any other legislation covers the relevant issues, that will be considered under that legislation. The issue of new use class E is raised in the officer report, and again, this does indeed place restaurants and retail in the same use class, and the very purpose of that is to allow flexibility coming forward and to help ensure the vitality of town centres in areas such as this. In conclusion, I would just only agree with your officer's conclusion that the proposed development would positively contribute to the diversity and viability of Kings Road and will preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the application building, the wider area and the Royal Hospital Conservation Area. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any questions to either the objector or the applicant? And please make clear who you're speaking to. Councillor Bakhtiar. No.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, my question is to Mr. Scott as an objector. Well, we are dealing with the case in front of us, application in front of us. We can't look into something in the future. We don't know what it is. If we are minded to grant this application, what conditions would you like to see? Please tell us if you want to see any conditions. Thank you.
can you, hi, can you put your microphone on? It'll be easier for everyone.
And turn
to
it
hear.
off.
Yeah, that's great.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
Ideally, that it remains as a retail unit, because this is exactly the same with the shop next, well, the two retail outlets next door, which were converted then into a very large restaurant. So all the deliveries are now taking place on our street. We have, they assured us there wouldn't be any scooter deliveries, which there are, which are now going past every hour of day and night. And I do respect the fact that the application is to convert two shops into one. And as I said in the outset, in principle, we wouldn't, have I gone off? No. In principle, we wouldn't object to that. However, the developer has formed, and this is exactly what happened last time, where we asked them categorically, are you going to be converting this into or applying for a restaurant, which they said no, and considering the Savills report, which I highlighted as well, Savills actually said there was no demand for a large retail unit in that part of the King's Road. So it slightly baffles as to how suddenly they've got the demand when their own report itself actually contradicted what their findings are to date.
Okay. Anyone else? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, both of you. So, colleagues, now it's our opportunity to talk to Fiona Ray and maybe Martin Lomas as well, if we wish to. I'd just like to, I'd like to start by asking Fiona if this issue of servicing and the issue of servicing in Radnor Walk, is that something that could be addressed by condition, or is that something that would be difficult to do?
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to do because the proposal isn't for any kind of change of use. The shop is in class, or the premises is in Class E at the moment, so the same servicing arrangements could remain.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other? Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for the clarification, the application in front of us is for amalgamation. So we are not looking into what happens in the future.
Yes, absolutely. There's no planning permission for a change of use at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Aretti.
Yeah, thank you. Fiona, just checking, the existing two units, are they both Class E now?
Yes, that's correct. They would both fall within Class E.
Would the Class E allow to set up a restaurant?
Yes, planning permission at the moment wouldn't be required to use either unit as a restaurant.
Right, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I think we've discussed this, and I think that the fact that the sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Wade, Linda, you wanted to.
A question. Is this is in a conservation area, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there a shopfront policy on this?
We have the existing shopfront SPD, which is our guidance for shopfronts, and then we have the usual shopfront policies that apply that are detailed in the report. So we would, as explained in the report, we would say that this is an enhancement over and above the existing situation. So the appearance of the shopfront as now proposed. Just flick back to the image there.
It's just that is a significant bit of architecture on the King's Road, and that shopfront does not seem to enhance or restore or do anything. And I just wondered whether or not there was consultation with the officers on shopfronts, because it can make a difference.
I don't believe there was any revisions sought as part of this
Sorry, I
application.
can't hear you very well.
Apologies. I don't think we had any revisions sought as part of this application. They've just put in the same application that was approved in 2016 without any changes. And officers haven't sought any adaptations to what was presented in that application or originally as part of this one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we need to make a decision about this. I think the fact of the previous application has to be given considerable weight here. The recommendation is to grant planning permission as stated in the report. Can I see those in favour, please? Those against? Okay, and Councillor Wade abstains. Okay, so that's granted then. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If we can now move on to consider the application at 27, the Little Boltons. And I think, Fiona, that's you again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the further objection that's been circulated just before the meeting. You would have had a copy of that on your desk. We also have the addendum report because we received 5 additional objections and they've been included in full for your attention. So turning to the slides, the image on your screen is of 27 The Little Boldens, the right-hand property in the pair of semis in front of you. Planning permission is sought for a new basement, and that basement would require the removal of 2 trees, which I'll show you in the slides. There's also proposals to change the rear extension, the alignment and design of that, the existing one that's there, for bricking up some windows and for a roof extension. So images on the screen show the rear of the building and also the tree discussed in the report, the Tree of Heaven. So the image on the left is the view of it from the adjacent street, and at the back you can see it just almost along the boundary line shared with the neighbour. That's an important consideration for members. That tree has been classed as a C-grade tree, and our arboricultural team are happy with its removal. They have confirmed that if a standalone application to remove that tree was received, they would grant it subject to a suitable replacement for the reasons outlined in the officer report. Turning to the drawings, this is a lower ground floor as existing, and you can just see the back rear wall of the existing extension there, which is to be realigned to this arrangement. And you can also see on that image that the 2 trees to be removed are shown. You can also see on this image the 2 roof lights directly behind the rear extension proposed to serve the basement, and also a grille in the front lightwell area. This image shows the basement floor plan, it shows the basement outlined in red. So it's not the full floor plan of the basement, but the extent of the basement is shown with that red dotted line. And it's showing that there's 50% of the front and rear gardens proposed to be excavated, just under 50%. This slide shows the existing front elevation of the property, which is helpful to see the proposed roof alterations. So the roof alterations on the proposed drawing can be seen here, both at the front and side dormer, and the rear dormer on the rear elevation there. And you can see the change in the design of the rear extension, as shown here. And then on this is the existing side elevation and the proposed, showing that dormer and the blocking up of the windows referred to in the officer report. You can also just see the realigned rear extension at the lower ground floor level to the back. Officers are recommending approval, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we've got a number of speakers for this. So first of all, the objectors. Now, I think Hugo Robson, Mr. Robson, hello, sir. And also, I think another neighbour, and Wesley Fongengi, who I think is an advisor. Is that right, sir?
No, just a point of order. Mr. Polizano is a neighbour.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you very much indeed for clarifying that. So, between you, you've got up to 3 minutes to share. So, please, whenever you're ready, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll go ahead first. I hope you appreciate the strength of feeling from the local community who are strongly opposed to this massive development. However, I am aware that strength of feeling is not enough on its own, and that you can only reject this application if it has, in your opinion, failed to satisfy the planning requirements. The planning officer who wrote the report recognises that this is not an open and shut case, and indeed the decision is an on-balance view, with different professional advisors taking opposing views. My observation is that to justify their compliance with CL7, the applicant's consultants had to resort to using the precedent at 37 Carlisle Square, a case that did not even come to this committee because it received no objections. If there is uncertainty about the technical requirements, I would hope that the issue as to whether the application meets the requirements to maintain the character of a conservation area and be in the interests of the well-being of residents is more straightforward. If you look at the map on the agenda, you will see that the garden of number 27 can be regarded as part of a very special square, with only one basement being built under the 16 buildings, plus Cowan Court, that form that square. That development, at 33 of the Little Boltons, as described in the submissions from many neighbours who experienced it, certainly did place an unreasonable inconvenience on the day-to-day life of those living nearby. I am therefore confident that you can support your 15 constituents and reject this case. Your 2 new constituents can, of course, put forward alternative plans, provided that they will not have the deepest part of the basement at exactly the point where the water level is the highest, leading to inevitable water issues, will be of a scale that can actually be constructed in a 20-month timetable, will cover all the development required, including what is intended to happen with a newly installed air conditioning unit, will properly explain how they will avoid damage to other people's properties, the current potential category 2 damage on a 4-metre retaining wall is just not acceptable, and avoids the stinging criticism of the Council's Transport Advisor by submitting a proper CTMP. Perhaps the applicants could even try and live in the building as it is for a few years, get to know their neighbours, enjoy the garden, where over the last few months they have been playing cricket and having children's birthday parties. They could even plant some new trees to allow them to grow before felling the magnificent tree of heaven. That would allow them to experience the character of the area and understand why their neighbours are fighting so hard to support each other and preserve that character. Thank you. If there's a little bit of time for Mr. Polizano, thank you.
Please, sir.
Mr. Chairman, in our opinion and that of our professional advisors, a number of whom this council has relied on in the past for their own advice, your officer's report does not, in fact, give careful weight to many aspects of the objections which have been made against this proposal. Therefore, we fail to understand the full justification for the officer recommendation to this committee. I and many others would encourage you, along with our professional advisors, to refuse this application in favor of a revised application that is not environmentally and socially harmful as this will be.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I think we're also joined by Mr. Perry, John Perry, who is an agent for the applicant, and I think Tony Hayes, who is a structural engineer. So between the two of you, please, when you're ready, you've got the same time, so touch over 3 minutes. Please, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me address your committee. The There's no doubt that constructing basements in the borough causes disturbance and upset, and indeed the borough rightly recognises this, and over many years has put together policies and controls on the actual execution of the basement works, as well as actually the consent for the basements in the first place. And the borough is not shy to put those controls into use where they deem it necessary. The obverse of that is if an applicant makes an application which falls entirely within the borough's policies, there is an expectation that that application be granted consent and that the policies for executing those works be followed. We strongly submit that this is in accordance with the policies. It is not a particularly massive basement, and that is an incorrect statement. It is within the borough policies, it is single story, and it's only 50% of the gardens. Furthermore, the discussion about the trees has been followed carefully with the officers, and the borough's tree officer is in support of the replacement of the tree of heaven with a 10 to 12 metre semi-mature specimen of 70 to 80 centimetres girth to replace that fully in accordance with the borough's policies. I'll now hand over to Mr. Tony Hayes, who will deal with the structural issues which were raised earlier.
Hello. The first thing is to pick up on is the investigation works that we've been carrying out for some time at the property. We've carried 2 boreholes, an external trial pit to determine the water levels. The majority of the proposed basement is above that water level. There's a small area at the rear which dips into that water. This development is not huge. It is not uncommon for this part of London. We have several projects which have been successfully carried out in the same geological and hydrological conditions. We've gone out and imported our team early. We have expert advisors from construction as well as geotechnical engineers. The application has been supported by a good CMS, a good sequencing. The sequencing will be further developed. The investigations will be further developed. The property is in occupation, so we are limited in what we can do, but we will carry on with the investigations in agreement with the neighbours until such time as everything is resolved. The purpose of the ground movement assessment is expected to be category 1, and the assessment will be made fully with the contractor's method statement rather than the one that's in the policy, as that is now in hand, and that consultant has been appointed.
I think you need to conclude that. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you everyone. Colleagues, questions, and again, if we can make it clear who we're asking a question of. Councillor Bakhtiar, and then Councillor Bennett, and then Councillor Eretti.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, my question is to the objector, Mr. Robson. Let me explain something before asking you the question. The recommendation in front of us is for the councillors. We are the decision makers, ultimate decision makers. Sometimes we agree with them, sometimes we disagree with them. And the number of objectors doesn't matter to us. Could be thousands. If the application is legal, we will approve it. So my question to you, what condition would you like to see to mitigate the damage in this application if we minded to agree to approve this application?
That's a difficult one, because I think that the conditions that I would put on would be such that they need to be resubmitted, because I think actually they can only be partial mitigation through the proposals that will be put forward by the council, and they were fairly standard. You will abide by CTMP and all the rest. I think the issue for me is that it is very interesting to hear that it's not a massive basement. It increases the size of the property by 52%. So in my words, in my view, that is massive. So I think that it really does mean that they need to look at this, the basement itself. I would argue the size of the basement. Does it really need to extend into the area where there is issues around water? So I think it is fundamentally, I don't think the conditions that you as the committee are sufficient to mitigate the problems that we will face. So I think that's my main point about conditions. But just to reiterate, I completely understand. If they've complied, you have to approve. I think my contention here is that they haven't complied. There is disagreement, natural disagreement, between the parties. And that sort of way you then say, well, if it's a score draw, that penalty will be scored by the larger number of constituents rather than two people who have bought a very nice new house but are trying to effectively spend, and my view is sort of just to say another condition that I don't think can be satisfied. They said, and we have tried repeatedly to understand the 20 months. We have said we don't think 20 months is realistic at all in terms of construction of this size. The applicant has provided no evidence of 20 months. Now, I received a note today to say that actually it's regarded as temporary. So the reason this development is okay is because it's temporary. But I've just heard temporary equals 6 months in relation to a billboard. Well, if 6 months is temporary, if temporary is 6 months for a billboard, my God, 2 years for a building and the destruction of people's lives. So sorry, I went along a bit of a ramble around the case, but just to be clear, I don't think there are conditions that you could put on which wouldn't be such that they would need to come back to this committee with a new application.
No, I understand. Thank you very much indeed for that. Yeah, a quick follow-up. Yeah.
Sorry, would Mr. Polizano might like to add as well.
No, I think we would reiterate that many of the objections which were raised through a very, very careful analysis by a team of professionals. It was not just a group of neighbors, but we've had serious professional advice which your officers have received, which has been sent to your officers on more than one occasion. And as I say, the objection is primarily not to the refurbishment of the house, but to the unsubstantiated impact that the deep basement excavation will have on the properties around us, particularly the adjoining residence, which happens to be mine, and the environmental damage that it will create. A portion of this northern area of the Little Boltons, the hydrology is in fact very, very different. It's been proven. The history of it was that there was a pond in that area. When the excavation took place at 33, the Little Boltons, for a deep basement, they had to basically resort to dewatering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for months on months on months. And the council will have evidence of this in its archives somewhere. There's no guarantee that this form of damage and disruption won't need to happen in this instance. The boreholes were done at a dry period. If you read the objections to the structural reports and things like that, it becomes clear that it's not a simple factual decision.
Thank you. A question to the applicant. Yes. You've heard the objectors, and the question is, are you prepared to amend your application or reduce the size of the basement? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, yes, and indeed we had a long conversation with Mr. Polizano, albeit remotely, during the development of the design. And the result of the design team and my client's deliberations are that the scheme stays as it is at the moment. It may be helpful to you, Mr. Chairman, to know that the CTMP is actually in draft, and one of the proposed conditions, should you be minded to grant consent, is that is subject to review and development. so that is not cast in stone. But I think that the other issues have been so well ventilated technically, partly by the Michael Bartley Partnership and the other consultants dealing with basements, the hydrology, the movement of the ground and so on, as my practice has done in this borough for 30 years. And I believe that it has been done very well, very solidly, very professionally. And yes, there will be professional disagreements, but I suspect the professional disagreements are because the objectors don't want the process of building a basement, which, as I said in my opening remarks, are well protected by the policies that your council have sensibly put in and continue to develop over the years. I don't know whether my colleague wants to answer anything. Do you want to, Tony?
Only to say that we've used this period of the application wisely. We've been out, as I say, to our contractual team. We haven't gone to the cheapest person. We've gone to the people that we want to work with, that have a successful record. We've employed Nightbuild, who are doing all the basement works for us. We've progressed forward with the further investigation works so that we can determine clearly, not theoretically, clearly what is happening at the back of the property where there is some water. It's quite different from what's happening at 33, and there's a huge difference in what happens with construction in those times as what happens now and how we can mitigate the impact. The first thing that we do is we put our new lower ground floor slab first thing we do is we put our new lower ground floor slab in, and this holds the base of the existing properties intact, doesn't let it go. The second thing we do when we put our underpinning in is we preload that underpinning to make sure that it doesn't move excessively. We're very careful with this process, and the contractors that we use, and particularly Nightbuild, have got a very, very good track record in the borough and are very well considered in the borough.
Okay, thank you. Tom, and then Arian, and then Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a question to the applicants. It's noted in the report that officers said on the CTMP that you have not yet effectively engaged with residents regarding the CTMP. And therefore, as you yourself mentioned it, the CTMP is subject to approval if we were to grant by officers. Could you just briefly describe the consultation that you have had so far and the consultation that you plan to have if you were to be granted permission before coming back with the final CTMP?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There's been very little consultation about the traffic management process so far, and that is why the CTMP is in draft. And I would expect the consultants responsible for that to have a full consultation process with the neighbours. We're fully aware that there is a school adjacent, which certainly curtails the construction hours so that there's no conflict with the school, and that would be taken into account as well. And I see no reason why any other neighbour requirements that fall within a reasonable category can't be seriously considered and put into the CTMP as it's drafted up. So it's certainly not this is what we're doing, take it forward like this. It is a consultation process which we're more than happy to continue through the formalisation of the CTMP, which has to be cleared in writing, as you know, by your officers before the process can continue into a development phase on site, and we'd be perfectly happy to do that.
Thank you. And one more question. I mean, you've both discussed some of the structural measures to ensure structural safety, but could you provide us a bit more detail on sort of, because this is a very sensitive area, sort of in a conservation area with sort of known hydrology issues, what sort of above and beyond measures will you take to ensure structural integrity of neighbouring properties and to ensure that there's not major issues or issues of any sort from flooding or influx of water resulting from this development.
Thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned before, what we've done is we've got our contractor on board. We have a relationship with them where we use a top-down form of construction. This means that before any significant excavation other than the underpinning process is carried out, the lower ground floor is replaced. This locks in the property, and it means that we effectively mine in underneath it. And whilst the underpin is carried out, we push the underpin, we preload it, we use jacks, so that any squidginess, for want of a non-technical term, in the formation is taken out during that construction process and not later on when the foundation settles. So those two items are very important for us. In terms of the hydrology, there is a consistency, and there is a development at 1315 down the road. We have taken their data, we've fed their data into our models as well. So we literally are just skirting on top of the water for a small area at the back of the property. The majority of the dig is above that level. We will prove that though, and we will also look at the techniques. In Southend, we used a ground stabilisation process, which allowed us to dig within the water without any disruption to the neighbouring properties. The soil that you generate there, and in an instance with Southend, it was 2 adjoined properties, not just the one, with very sensitive dressed wall. The soil remains stable and is allowed to dig and doesn't allow any flow of water into the excavation until such time as the box is complete, and the box is complete and the box does the job of holding out the water.
Sorry, yeah, one follow-up question. You heard that one of the objectors, I think was Mr. Polisano, mentioned that he believes the boreholes he dug to check the water level were during a dry period, and that actually during wet periods the water level might be higher, and therefore the development could have, you know, a more significant part of the development could be going into the water level. Is that a risk you're aware of and have mitigated against?
They were dug in January, so not particularly dry period, and they're consistent with other data in the other areas. And as I said, we will be digging a shaft down to the formation level that will give us not just the look of the water, but also the look of the soil in actuality rather than through a 100mm borehole.
I think, Aaron, you were next, and then Linda.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think Tom just asked my question to the applicant. As a follow-up to the objectors, Mr. Polisano and Mr. Robson, would you be happy if the applicant probably would meet the threshold and the policy with whether the digging or the instructions that they just clarify?
Could you repeat the question?
No, I'm just saying, would you be happy if they meet the threshold and the policy of the council?
Meet the...
In terms of the basement and the structural impact and the environment?
I think the particulars of this site haven't really been taken into account, so everything has been based on precedent. This is a small, constrained site. No detailed investigation has been done into the structural conditions of my residence and the particular structural conditions of my residence, and a series of assumptions have been made on a set of engineering principles that are being left up to a contractor to decide going forward. Therefore, the supposition that the way it's going to work hasn't been proven. It hasn't been detailedly investigated, and while a titular investigation of the conditions within the ground have been made. No particular investigation about the conditions of the adjoining properties have been carried out. A few other things I'd just like to reference. There was no detailed discussion with me about engineering principles. I had a 40-minute Zoom call in which the gentleman introduced the project to me and told me they were going to dig a deep basement, which my residence would become de facto an extension of a construction site for an unsubstantiated period of time. So I would be happy if the residence was, the very fine residence, was renovated into a wonderful house without a deep excavation of a basement, which it's noted in the structural engineer's report will have some harm on the adjacent party wall, which is mine.
Thank you, Mr. Poser. Question to applicant. Is this a detached one? I'm sorry, I think there's a...
We have a detached condition and an attached condition.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Linda, do you want to ask?
I'd like to go back to the issue of the water. Most of the applicants, most of the objectors have commented on the issue of water table, the problem that's happened in the past. What types of assessments, because these are a number of buildings in a street, what assessments have been done on other buildings, not necessarily the ones that are adjacent? And also is kind of, because I can remember the water being pumped out, and that was quite disruptive, not only to the street, but traffic and everything else. And it did seem to go on for some time. So I'm intrigued as to your methodology, as to how you've assessed the buildings, and also these, because of the age of the buildings, how the water content, so to speak, in the buildings might be impacted by withdrawal of water.
The intention is not to withdraw the water, so the difference...
You have this, we know there's water underneath, don't we?
There's water under all of London, yes.
But we know there's kind of like a lake-like, that people keep on referring to a lake of water or a river or whatever. But do we know precisely how it affects the different houses in that terrace?
The water is not a static item. It flows from the springs that are occurring in the middle of London through to the Thames and feeds the Thames. It flows generally down through the rear gardens, which are north-south, which is what happens down through what we have at Little Boltons. So it runs parallel with the housing streets, and it runs under the streets. So the water is 6.23 metres below the garden. So it's a long way down and doesn't vary enormously over seasons, and it doesn't vary very enormously in an area. So the impact on this house, we know what this house looks like, we know how this house has been built, we understand this house because we have record drawings of how it's been done. I'd like to correct the applicant, the objector first. We haven't handed anything over to the contractor in terms of the overall design of the property. He's an expert in constructing holes, basements, and that's what we're taking from him. We still retain the designers of the property, and the water. Whilst we respect it, it's not a difficult thing to deal with if you know it's there. I think the trouble with number 33 was they tried to excavate a swimming pool at the back of their property and found the water after the fact. And as I said, the technologies for dealing with it in those times were very crude and very unfortunate. But we don't do that now.
So you think that the previous problem was a miscalculation?
For 33? yes, a misconception, and actually using drawing out water by pumping trying to pump an entire basement clear of water is not something that we do nowadays, because it can lead to further settlement.
And so you have if something untoward, you have that provision in your plan?
Yeah, the majority of this dig is above water. So there's only a very small section for a very shallow depth. And what you can do is you improve the ground locally by grouting. These, as I said before, the way London works is that you have a clay subsoil. The clay subsoil acts as a barrier for the water. The water comes out of springs, rivers, and flows down on top of that clay within the granular media, so the sands and gravels, which are the terrace gravels, the Kempton beds. So it flows through those that material. It's not like a lake where you've cut a bowl out of clay and filled it with water. That is not what we have in this part of London. The geology does change in RBKC as you go further north. Around here, then the clay is more dominant. But where we're talking about the Little Boltons, it's a flowing water. So its nature is to flow past the house. So effectively what we do is encourage it not to come in by improving the soil locally so that it won't flow into our excavation. The back of the excavation is piled. So it has a small diameter pile wall which prevents the water from coming into the dig. And it's only locally along the sides where the underpins are taken down into the water and the soil is improved locally to allow that to happen.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. So colleagues, we now our opportunity to ask officers. I'd like to start actually with a couple of questions. The tree of heaven, which is in the back garden, which is going to be removed. I mean, I think it's only a category C tree, according to the tree people, but it is quite prominent in the streetscape. I think, did I hear that it's proposed that a 10 to 12 metre tree is put in to replace that, were we to grant this? And what kind of tree would that be?
Yeah,
do you know?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it was proposed to be a pin oak, which is an appropriate species for this locality, and it will be a semi-mature tree. So it won't be as big as the tree of heaven I've just put back up on the screen. Right. It will take some time to establish, but our arboricultural team are confident that in time it will make potentially a greater contribution than this existing C-grade tree.
Right, okay. The other thing I wanted to ask was, in the comments, Mr. Jackson, who's the Boltons Association chairman, he points out that, again, were we actually to grant this, about the way in which the CTMP might have a kind of, well, he describes it as a pedestrian tunnel. So in other words, the mechanics of the way in which construction was managed. Presumably that's something that we could, again, obviously, were we minded to grant, that we could simply note that, and there would be an expectation that that would be part of the further iteration of the CTMP. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult to say that you could prescribe that. I mean, you could within the condition, but it may be more helpful to have an informative drawing attention to that as one potential solution, because it may well be that the objectors, when working with the applicant's team, prefer something else, because there's no, perfect solution for any construction site.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, Councillor Bennett, Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Two things I just wanted to raise quickly. One is the structural issues of other houses on the street that we've heard a lot about, both in the written comments and this evening. I was wondering if it would be a reasonable condition, or if there's anything more we can do to require further investigation of structural impact on neighbouring properties as part of the conditions.
It's really difficult to require that, because we have the basement SPD, which we've adopted, which sets out the parameters of what we require in a construction method statement. And the applicant has covered all of those things off. Whilst the professionals dispute different things, this is exactly why our SPD requires a structural engineer to sign off and agree it on behalf of the applicant. So, because we aren't the professionals as town planners. We do, however, have an informative requiring drawing attention to the party wall agreement, which would apply in this case. Also, building regulations would have to be involved in this to oversee the construction. So there's more legislation at play that provides protection going forward than the planning remit can give.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the likely impact on the party wall we heard about, you think those informatives and conditions you've just mentioned are the best way to deal with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, over the years of basements in Kensington and Chelsea, this is as far as we can go under town planning legislation. And those are better placed to deal with those kinds of issues and resolving them.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Then the second one was also mentioned in the comment by Mr. Jackson from the Bolton Association, is the fact that there is a school, Bousfield School, on that road. It might be more of an informative than a condition, but I think it's important that that is considered when the CTMP is reviewed, the impact on children arriving and leaving school there.
We can absolutely add an informative drawing the attention to that. Helpfully, we do have the new Code of Construction Practice condition as well, and there's, as part of that Code of Construction Practice, we have additional safeguards of those near schools, but I think an informative can only be helpful.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, any other points? Mo, do you want to question?
The basement issue, is it regular? Is it within our remit, within our regular basements that we have been approved in the past few years? Is it 50% of the area? Do we have any say on where to stop?
It has to be within the open area of the site. There has to be a retained open area for the 50%. So you couldn't sort of cut little pieces out of the garden and create a maze. It has to be a meaningful, uninterrupted 50%, which this complies with. I mean, it is a large basement. However, it is also policy compliant, so it is quite difficult. But it does tick the boxes of policy CL7 in that sense.
And is it still 50%?
Yes, it's just under 50% in the front and in the rear, which is policy compliant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, thank you. Well, in that case, I think we need to make a decision. Clearly, as we've just been discussing, our basement policy is framed in terms of percentages. So obviously, very large, fine buildings, just under 50%, clearly is, for better or for worse, represents a very significant amount of building work. But the fact is that is the policy that we have that we must consider. I think Councillor Bennett's point about an informative that specifically mentions the fact that Bousfield School is nearby, I think that's important. I think the replacement of the tree, I'm assuming that must be in one of the conditions. I'm just looking quickly to see where it is. Yeah, I think condition 13, details required, so that would be specified there. And I think, and the CTMP would clearly have to be have to be agreed as we discussed. But I think, looking at the proposal as a whole, I think that probably represents what, as a committee, we are able to do. So I think in that case, I will put to the vote the recommendation is to grant, as set out in the report, with that added informative and obviously the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour, please? Those against? Okay, so Councillor Wade was against. Sorry, Linda, you...
I voted for the...
Okay, all right. So that's carried by 4 votes to 0. Councillor Baptiste abstained. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Mr. Chairman, could I make just a point of order?
Well, very briefly.
Yeah. Shame it was 4-0 on penalty shootout. But could I just ask whether the conditions, they seem to be so great, in a way, we've moved no further forward from the pre-application advice that was given and the conditions that were imposed at that point. Could I request that it comes back to the committee in relation to the satisfaction of these conditions, because they are so extensive?
No, I'm afraid, I'm sorry, you can't. I understand the point you're making, and obviously what happens is that when an application is granted, the conditions have to be satisfied. So what happens is the applicant and their advisors have to they have to submit details to fulfill the conditions. Now, although those are not publicly advertised, you could follow on the website as those came back in. If you wished to object to the details of a condition, you could object, and if you involved other colleagues, friends and colleagues, locally, councillors, then potentially they could come back to committee. But that's the way in which the process works. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay. So if we could now move on to consider the application at Nelgwyn House, and I think, Fiona, that's you again.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. So I'd just again like to draw members' attention to the addendum report because we received one further objection. We've also circulated 2 late objections which you have seen hard copies of when you arrived this evening. Just some images in front of you of the site. Planning permission is sought for external alterations to the front of Nelgwyn House. Some of the work doesn't require planning permission, but the package of works presented is detailed within the report. I've also got some images to the rear of the site to show you, because changes are proposed at the rear as well, including the creation of a new rear canopy and some alterations to the access gates. The property is not listed and it's not in a conservation area. And I'll just put up on screen the overall plan of works proposed to the front. So to the front we have a new disabled access ramp, some new luggage ramps, new paving, planters, and alterations to the existing entrance portico. Also got just an image of the front elevation there. This image shows the proposed lighting plan. Now there are lots of existing lights there at the moment, but they're to be replaced as part of this. And at the rear we can see the new entrance portico on the top image, proposals to widen the entranceway and introduce a sliding gate, and associated landscaping works at the front there. So officers are recommending approval for the application and see the disabled access ramp as a planning benefit, and I have nothing further to add to the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I think we have an objector registered, Mrs. Van Semeren.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for waiting and bearing with us a little bit. So when you're ready, now you actually an owner of a property in the building, yes?
Yes, I do, yes.
So when you're ready, please, you've got up to 3 minutes to...
Could I just ask,
Yeah.
because the objector who can't speak, have you got her letter then?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Oh, sorry.
lady's name.
Sorry, Chairman. I think I may be able to help. One of the hard copy letters that were circulated before the meeting,
Okay.
they're just checking that you've received that. So you will have seen Zena.
See, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Zena's
Yes,
letter.
sorry, I recognise your name. Thank you.
Sorry, yes.
Please,
Thank
when
you.
you're ready, go ahead.
Yes, yes. Yes, and I do own a flat, and this comes from owning a flat that directly overlooks the front drive, which not many on the ground floor. The plans by interior designers Gosling are superficial design over function. They do not enhance the 1930s building. The stone sundial area, why lose greenery to put a sundial under a large tree? This is dead space. Why light up Nalgwyn to look like a flash hotel? And I do believe there is a real excess of lighting in the new scheme, quite different from what is existing. More important is the narrow footpath, reduced from 5 foot to 3 foot or less, in places not wide enough for a wheelchair. Introducing the disabled ramp appears to be box ticking unless it can be reached in safety. The ramp should also be kept clear, but there's no bike storage, so I fear this will become somewhere to chain your bike up to the new railings. It will be render the disabled ramp hazardous. Nalgwyn Drive is not a hotel drop-off area. There is no doorman. It is 450 privately owned flats with plumbers, builders, electricians, every type of delivery under the sun. Huge vans come zooming in throughout the day. Amazon itself must make 3 or 4 deliveries a day. The designer personally told me the drive would need active traffic management to keep it safe. Is this curbless piazza going to be practical and safe? Where do guests wait with their luggage for a taxi? There's nowhere in safety. The suitcase ramps reduce the front footpath to 1 foot wide. They are rendered useless if a vehicle is parked too close to the base. There is no safe landing space to alight if a child rushes down the suitcase ramp or someone falls over. The board insists on retaining the central revolving doors, which are little used as too narrow if carrying baggage. This puts more pressure on the overused left side door and drive area, as this is the direction of travel for most. A queue already forms to use the left-hand side door. The base of the left ramp will be a real pressure point, an accident waiting to happen, hardly a luxury arrival. Please, I ask this committee to have a full risk assessment of these plans and take into consideration that your transport people might have looked at them, but Nalgwyn House has been like a ghost town for over a year, so you can't assess the front drive easily at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Toomey, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yep.
My name is Bill Toomey, and I'm the chairman of Nalgwyn House Freehold, and I'm responsible for the 420 apartments in the building. I'm also one of the 420, and I've owned an apartment there since 2006, and my family and I use the property quite regularly for accommodation purposes. The board says the long-term interest of the building is a key priority and has an express obligation to maintain the property as a luxury block of apartments, and we carry out major external works on average every 5 years. However, the entrances front and back, were last upgraded nearly 50 years ago in 1974 and are in need of refurbishment, as evidenced by chipped marbling, industrial stained slabbing and worn steppings, and the lack of any disabled access. The entrances are tired and in need of attention. As chairman, I've had numerous demands and requests for disabled access, wheeled luggage and buggy access, and complaints about and comments about the relative quality of our offering compared to newer properties in the area. And the vast majority of owners are very much in favour. Last December, we withdrew a planning application and conducted a consultation programme, and out of that, we moved the disabled access to the right-hand side of the entrance to meet the issues of the named objector here tonight, also leaving the statue in place, and other suggestions with regard to security that have been taken on board by the board. I would like to point out that the project is fully funded by cash in advance and is part of our 5-year plan. Previous improvements have included state-of-the-art camera security systems internally and externally, covering the front and rear entrances, recognising the importance of security. And on lighting, we've taken professional advice from architects, surveyors, lighting engineers, and lighting specialists. And the lighting specialists have conducted a trial of lighting to ensure that the lighting does not pollute any apartments, and the new lighting covers front and back and introduces LED lighting, which is more environmentally friendly and can be controlled centrally. The works are all external, so issues with regard to COVID will be reduced. Contractors will pay attention to all health and safety matters. The works will result in better quality stonework, including hard-wearing porphyry stone in the driveway, flush to minimise noise, edged in granite with built-in uplighters to provide better guidance at night, and Portland stone steppings. In picking up some of the comments earlier, the description of the width of the pathways, in my view, is incorrect, and the driveway area is expanded with level surfaces for ease of access for all. So, in conclusion, Chairman, Nell Gwyn is a wonderful building, and the proposed enhancements, if approved, will improve its overall attractiveness with quality materials, improve the ease of access for all, including disabled access, and hopefully will last a further 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, anyone got any questions? Councillor Wade.
Reference has been made about disabled access. 3 metres, is it 3 metres or is it less than 3 metres? And also there are quite a lot of deliveries there. So I was concerned about those two particular comments that were made in the objections I saw in the plans.
Okay, so the building is 1937 and benefits from an in-out driveway and is the only one on Sloane Avenue. So that in itself helps with that process. There is a flow in and out of taxis and deliveries as part of the process. The disabled ramp to get the appropriate health and safety grading will come further out towards the road to provide a gradual gradient. And it is, I think, from memory, I think it's about 1.6 metres wide, not 3 metres wide. And bicycles will not be permitted to be chained. That ramp access will be for disabled access with a gradual gradient. We're putting 2 luggage ramps separate to that so that people with wheeled luggage can more easily access the front entrance. And there is still ample space for stepping in between the 2 luggage ramps, substantial area. I'd be guessing, but it must be at least 4 metres between the 2 ramps. And so your second question was the volume of deliveries.
It was also about deliveries. You dealt with taxis, but there are other deliveries to Nell Gwyn House, aren't there?
There are, with 420 apartments, as you might imagine, they're quite a volume. The new surface and the engineering for it is to broaden the in-out driveway and have level have levels between the pathway, the new driveway, and then the area where the gardened area is today. So that expands that area. We will have a bollard, two bollards, one bollard on either side to prevent permanent parking. And the idea is that it would allow a flow through, and you can have two levels of flow through, one with a taxi parked and one with a flow through where cars can pass.
Thank you.
Any other question? Tom?
Could I say something?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Only the councillors are able to ask questions. Sorry. Tom?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, a couple of questions for Mr. Toomey, if I may. So first one is on bike storage. And you mentioned that bikes wouldn't be permitted to be chained up there, which is obviously aesthetically desirable. We do have policies on encouraging active travel, and I think it's generally recognised that we all need to do better at encouraging more cycling. And I know this is, I think you mentioned this was part of your sort of 5-year plans. Do you have any bike storage, or do you have any plans to put in bike storage?
We don't have bike storage today on site. The building has basement areas, but it's not, whilst the overall building is owned by the freehold company, there are long leases in place to third parties and therefore not under our control. Through the consultation process that I undertook at Christmas, in December rather, one of the requests was that we put bike storage and bike bars that you can tie them up to at the rear of the building, which is something that we're considering as a board to install.
So it's under consideration.
It's under consideration.
It's not part of these plans.
Together with other suggestions, by the way, that were made, and there were quite a number which I welcome the feedback, because we want to enhance the building for all the occupants.
Okay, thank you. And the second question regards a letter we received regarding 2 friezes and a statue of Nell Gwyn by the artist David Evans, and the I think it's Ms. Hall wrote in about that. I mean, they sound like they're of significant value to the building in the area. Yes. Will you be protecting them?
Yes, we will. And through the consultation at Christmas time, the plan had, as advised by our architect, to take the statue, and I'm not sure, Fiona, if you could put up the image of the front of the building, the statue of Nell Gwyn, which we gather is the only statue, public statue representation of Nell Gwyn. So if you look at the image, Nell Gwyn, as you will know, is a 17th century character, and the building is Art Deco 1937. And the architect says that the statue is diminutive in the shoot that it's in, and his proposal was to bring the statue to the front area in the raised garden area where you can see the sign in. And his proposal was to make it more of a feature and to identify the location of Nell Gwyn as a building. There was significant objection from residents to moving the statue. So as part of the consultation process and with the board reviewing, we decided we'd leave the statue in place and use the lighting facilities to identify it or give it greater prominence. The frieze you're referring to, unfortunately, you won't be able to see them very clearly in this image, and that's one of the issues. It's in the marble stone that you can see over the name Nell Gwyn House, which is a canopy. And that frieze we're looking to highlight by gold leaf, a bit like the lettering behind you on your symbol, to give it more prominence and have more discrete targeted lighting on it to profile it better.
I think, were there 2 friezes?
Yes, there's one above the canopy and one below the canopy. Okay. And what we want to do, they're very decorative, but lost, so to give greater attention and profile to them.
Okay. Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baccia.
I question to the objectors. I'm trying to be pragmatic in here. I'm trying to help you out. What conditions would you like to see in this application? And be realistic. What is worrying you very much in this application, and what condition would you like to see?
I simply think the front drive is not safe. I mean, all these vans come zooming in. You've reduced the footpath from 5 foot to 3 foot. Around by the planters, it's about 2'4". I mean, it's not fit for purpose. A person in a wheelchair, if they're dropped off at the front, can't get to the disabled ramp in safety. I just think pedestrians need protection. If you see people standing at the front of Nell Gwyn, a family say they use a 5 foot of footpath. I did a drawing. You're literally going to have a single file footpath. And then if a large van parks at the base of the suitcase ramp, nobody can use the suitcase ramp because the footpath is 1 foot wide. I mean, 1 foot. You can't reach the front steps if a van is parked by that by that ramp.
May I ask the AO, the applicant or the agent to comment on this, please?
Thank you. So if you look at the image on the screen again, where you can see a van parked on the left-hand side, and what my Mrs. Van Smieren is referring to there is part of the blockage. We're installing bollards right where the back rear tyre of that car, or that vehicle is, one on either side, to prevent this type of parking. Secondly, the references to the reduction in the width of the path is incorrect. The imagery, in keeping with what you might see more generally in Kensington, Chelsea, is to have path and road and then into the garden area, the one level surface, making it easier for particularly wheelchair access and buggies to get about. So it's not that we're narrowing the footpath, we're broadening the access area and as I say, installing a bollard left and right to stop that type of vehicle parking.
Yeah, question to the applicant, Mr. Toomey. You just mentioned the bollards. Are they, how do I say that, detachable, as in could be removed through a switch, or you could control it? Or is it standard fixed?
It'll be a standard fixed one in a bell shape, again similar to what you might see in the wider Chelsea area.
Do you know the spec of it? How thick?
In terms of metric, it would be about, forgive me, I wouldn't know the exact measurement, but say about 300 mil, 450 mil. Thank you.
All I'm trying to do is that, it would occupy some of the space, I would believe.
I'm sorry?
No, that would occupy or take away some of the space from the footpath, I believe.
Yes, but allow access for wheelchair in particular, but and wheel luggage and people to pass. Yes.
Would you consider not making that fixed, or you have got switch control?
We did, but again under advice, it may well get, because it's low, it may well get hit and knocked, so it needs to be robust enough to be a deterrent and to exist. I think the cost of making it a sinkable bollard, first of all, we don't see any benefit in sinking it because it's there to stop people parking like that van is.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everyone. So we need to ask officers if we've got any other questions to them. Tom, do you want to go first?
Yes, thanks, John. I just had a quick question on the bike storage, and I know we do have a policy on providing bike storage. I don't know if it's activated by the nature of this development, but we are sort of improving access for vehicles. We obviously want to avoid bikes being chained up at the front. Is there any way, either via a condition or an informative, we can give Mr. Toomey some assistance in his conversations with other board members to encourage the the installation of some bike storage at Nell Gwyn.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be able to attach a planning condition because it wouldn't be necessary to make this development acceptable, and that's one of the tests for conditions. However, an informative can definitely be added to encourage and improve bike storage at Nell Gwyn.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we need to... Oh, Linda, do you want to ask a question?
Ms. Ray, I'm just still concerned about the disabled access and the actual space. There's quite a high volume of traffic coming in there. It's you know, there are a lot of flats, a lot of deliveries. People park in awkward ways. So, you know, you might have to do a drop-off of somebody who may be mobility impaired. And I just did a disability officer see this? Because I can see the concern, and it's just the combination of deliveries and the disability access that I'm concerned about.
We've assessed it in accordance with our transport SPD and our access SPD, we've assessed it as officers. The single level surface and the bollards create the safety between pedestrians and traffic that we require. We actually are quite encouraging of shared surfaces in our transport SPD, and we see down on things like Exhibition Road, we've been quite positive about shared surfaces working well. But in this particular site, because it's private, we wouldn't necessarily be adverse to the installation of bollards. So that's something that the applicant has a desire to do for additional safety between the two. We are confident that with the shared surface, the ramp and the turn, there is adequate space to turn a wheelchair or a pram around in that space safely. I mean, there's always going to be a conflict at the front of a busy residential entrance, but we believe that this is an improvement overall.
Is there any possibility of actually, to secure that space, so to speak, a safe space, of actually having a defined area indicated?
That would need a further planning application, I believe, because the level proposed would need to change if it was going to be completely defined. The definition is created with the pattern of paving as shown on the screen there. So I don't think as part of this application we could necessarily secure any kind of change in level. And I'm not sure what we could achieve with an additional change in material over and above this design.
Right, thank you. Okay, I think we need to make a decision. I think this is difficult in my view because I am actually rather sympathetic to the objectors actually at a kind of just an ordinary everyday level. I think it's perfectly, the points made are perfectly reasonable. If I lived there, personally, I'm not sure I wouldn't be in favour of this. I am, however, struggling really to think of a proper planning reason why this particular application is unacceptable. And I think on that basis, I think rather reluctantly, I'm not sure we have anywhere else to go. I would suggest, colleagues, before we move to a decision that I think Councillor Bennett's idea of having an informative relating to bike storage, I think that's a good idea. I think it's a perfectly reasonable idea to add, and I think an informative would be the right way of doing this. So on that basis, as I say, somewhat reluctantly, but nevertheless, the application in front of us is there with that additional informative. The recommendation is to grant with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour, please, of granting? Those against?
I'm abstaining, Chair.
You're abstaining. Councillor Wade. Sorry, you're against. Okay, so the application, the application is granted by 2 votes in favour, 2 abstentions and 1 against. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much indeed for coming along. Thank you. If we can now move on to consider Beaufort Mansions, Beaufort Street, and I think, Fiona, that's still
Yes.
here, isn't it?
Thank you, Chairman.
Please, go ahead.
So this application, planning permission is sought for the demolition of an existing shed in the rear garden and its replacement with a new outbuilding. The site again is not listed and not in a conservation area, but the burial ground next door has a wall surrounding it which is grade 2 listed. So just turning to the images on screen, these are some images of the existing shed at the property. And here you can see the existing shed in an elevation. So as outlined in red, that's what is to be demolished. They've also highlighted a bush that is to be removed, but planning permission isn't required for its removal. The existing height of the shed is 2.25 metres to the apex of the roof. This is the proposed replacement shed. It does have a larger footprint and its height would be an additional 20 centimetres above the apex of the existing roof. So it has an overall height of 2.45 metres. Now there's, on the image at the top, you can see that there's the existing listed wall adjacent, and above the height of the lowest part of this wall, no better way to describe it, the lowest part, it will rise about 450 millimetres above it. Now, importantly, officers have considered the impact of the building on the setting of the wall, and whilst higher, we are confident that it wouldn't be harmful to the setting of those walls, and given it's set away from it as well. And the overall design and appearance of the outbuilding, we believe, is commensurate with a rear garden in the borough. So I won't add any further to the officer report, but our recommendation is to grant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I think we have a couple of people registered to speak in objection. Perhaps who would like to go? Mr. England, appropriate name for this evening. Peter England.
Thanks,
and I think you're joined by a couple of colleagues. So perhaps, perhaps if everyone could introduce themselves first, that would be best.
Sure. My name is Herbert Daly. I am the chairman of the church committee at Fetter Lane Moravian Church.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, my name is Cynthia Dyes.
I was going to say Cynthia.
Hello,
yes.
I'm a member of the congregation at Moravian Church.
Right, good. So,
Sorry, I'll just say.
thank you. When you're ready, between you, you've got up to 3 minutes. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Cynthia,
Get on. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I said I'm a member of the Moravian Church congregation, so we're responsible for the wall, which forms the perimeter of our burial ground. The walls of the Moravian burial ground were originally part of Sir Thomas More's stable yard, and much of the mole remains and is of very high historic value, listed grade 2, and it has been placed by Historic England on the Heritage at Risk Register. In 2017, the congregation raised funds to undertake a pilot repair project on 3 sections of the wall. The results of that study will inform our strategy for more extensive repairs when funding permits. Conscious of this duty to repair and maintain this important part of Moravian and Chelsea history, we disagree with comment 14 in the summary of objections. Our conservation architect, Murray John, advises us that a space of at least 2 meters on either side of the wall is necessary to provide access for repair and maintenance and to prevent damage to the footings and stability of the wall. The plans as submitted show a space of just 2 feet between the wall and the proposed structure. The proposal as it stands, therefore, creates a significant impediment to the future restoration and maintenance of that section of the Tudor wall. A second challenge we would like to make is to the response at 16 relating to our objection about potential damage to a London plane tree, which is around 150 years old. It is located on the Moravian side of the wall, is 17 meters high, with a stem diameter of 1.36 meters. And this year we invited Greg Packman, a noted arboriculturist and expert on the London Plain and a member of the Ancient Tree Forum, to undertake a tree survey so that we could improve our tree management plan. On this particular tree, he designated a 21-meter radius root protection area. The tree is currently 8 meters away from the wall, and the plans as they stand would not provide a radius of 21 meters. Also, the heavier structure risks damaging the roots and will interfere with water getting to that area. And finally, it is also, the northern part of that area is part of the RBKC Chelsea Archaeological Priority Area, so any excavation would have to be done with extreme care. So for these reasons, we believe that the plans as they stand should not be approved. And I'll hand over to Mr. Inglis.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thanks, Chairman and Councillors. I wish to highlight there are issues with this proposal on scale, appearance, character, overlooking in loss of privacy and noise and disturbance. The original Level 1 advice, dated 9th of December 2020, clearly stated the proposal should not have an uncompromising boxy form and shouldn't extend above the boundary wall and fence. The communal garden, obviously we've stressed the historical wall, but there's also the fence to the communal garden that stretches all the way down to the end of Beaufort Street. So in fact, the proposal, although there's been tweaks, is still an uncompromising box with a monopitch roof. And as said, it extends half a metre above the boundary wall and the fence. It also butts up to the fence to the communal garden. It doesn't respect any space, and the gutter is actually effectively inaccessible to the adjoining area. You can't clean it out. The whole proposal is overlooked by bedrooms to the rear of the property. You're going to have a to-ing and fro-ing process between the garden office. This isn't going to be a shed back into the flat, and that is likely to be illuminated. So I'm absolutely sure there will be noise and disturbance from light.
Thank you very much. I need to, sorry, time is up, but thank you very much indeed for that. If I can now ask, I think, Ms. Kerr, who's representing the applicant.
Hi.
Oh, hello, hi. So in similar fashion, you've got up to 3 minutes as well, please.
Actually, there was nothing further that we wanted to add to the officer's report. We were in agreement with it.
Okay,
And,
all right.
That was
Okay,
fine for us.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, that's understood. So colleagues, questions to either party? Arian, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Chairman. Question to Ms. Kerr, the applicant agent. I believe this is a shared communal garden.
No, it's not. It's a private garden.
It's a private
It's a
garden to
private
that
garden.
flat itself.
Sorry?
It's a private garden to that
Yes,
flat.
that's correct. It's overlooked by other flats, but it is a private garden.
So the share of the freehold is owned by the flat.
No, the flat has a lease, and that includes the garden. So the other flats within the building don't have access to the garden. Only the one flat, which is the applicant's. It belongs to their flat. But as the flat is, it is part of the larger building.
So if I was going to buy that flat, I would get the garden as well as part of the
That's
deal.
correct. Nobody else has access to the garden.
Because in the objections, I can clearly see that there's one objector who could access the garden. Is that true or not?
No, they can't. I think the misunderstanding is the other mansion blocks along Beaufort Street do have communal gardens. So they are looking, they're objecting from the neighbouring properties, thinking that this will set a precedent for their communal gardens, and it's not.
Right.
It is a private garden. So I
Right.
think on the properties to the south are all communal, and to the north they're private.
But not this.
Not this one, no.
Any comment from the objectors, please?
Yes, historically it was a communal garden. 106 purchased it in the
Could
past.
you speak up a bit, sir?
Sorry. Historically it was a communal garden from north to south. Freeholds split, sold by Cadogan Estates in the 70s, and over time, rightly or wrongly, fences went up. That's why this is a private garden. They purchased it about 20 years ago. But the aspect is obviously, when you look over it, is a communal garden looking across to the burial grounds.
Thank you.
Tom, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A couple of quick questions for Ms. Kerr. Firstly, on materials, I noticed there's a condition saying that the doors have to be in timber. What materials do you intend to use for the rest of the building, and what efforts have you made to make sure that it's in keeping with the area?
It's proposed to be timber clad. And
The whole thing's timber?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And is that reflecting anything else in the area, or just reflecting the existing materials on the existing?
The existing property
Right.
and the existing materials on the site, and I think it is generally considered to be a suitable material for an outbuilding.
Okay. And then my second question is, how far is it from the wall, to the Moravian burial?
Let's see, about 60 centimetres.
About 60 centimetres. Okay. I might raise that again with officers, but thank you very much.
I would like to mention the existing shed is closer.
Yes.
So the proposal is without doubt an improvement in terms
understood.
of access to the wall.
Thank you.
Actually, I've got a question to Ms. Kerr as well. Two things. First of all, I just want to check I've heard correctly. So the existing building, which is, structure, which is recognisably a garden shed, okay?
Yeah.
And I think we were told it's 2.5 metres high, yeah?
Not that high.
Right. And what's proposed, it's slightly higher than the existing.
Yes, yep, that's correct.
But have you got numbers for that?
Yes, well, the existing one is I can't see. I think it's 2275, the existing.
Sorry, can you speak up, please? Sorry, I beg your pardon.
2275, the existing.
Right.
And the proposed is 2450.
Right, okay. So, yeah, 20-something centimetres higher. And the other question, now the footprint of the proposed structure obviously is quite a bit bigger, but what kind of foundations does that have?
That's not something I would design personally, but I presume it would be a slab foundation.
Sorry, it would be a what?
A slab foundation
Right,
with footings around the edge.
Right. So in other words, it would be similar to a garden shed.
Yes,
since
that's
it would
correct.
sit on a slab. But it's not if I understood your answer to my colleague a moment ago, it's not something that requires foundations in the sense that a building normally requires digging down and...
It will require some form of foundation. It will probably be a slab, but the construction in this proposal is a sort of an insulated panel construction as opposed to brickwork. So the structure in itself is lighter.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Well, thank you for that. Any other questions? Ariel, do you want to...
Sorry, following your question, I've just got another one. Are you using this outbuilding as an annex, as in you get permission to use it as a living, or just for office and gym?
It's for home use. So for if you wanted to use it as your office or a study or a gym, or just like a garden room to have your lunch in. By no means an office whereby you're inviting people onto the premises to conduct business. So no, it's for home use.
Right. I'm going to ask to the officers later on. Right. Thank you very much.
Did I answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
No
okay.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So, apologies, I should have asked this earlier. Just back on the materials, the roof is obviously what a lot of the residents are going to be looking down onto. What will the roof look like?
Well, the previous design had just a regular dark grey asphalt style roof, but we had to change that for this submission to a green roof, considering that to be a nicer thing to look down upon.
Is that a green roof in the sense of planting, or just the colour green?
No, planting.
Right, okay.
A sedum, so it should be wildflowers, not tall growth, not potted things on the
Yeah.
roof, but it's just be like a blanket.
Okay, okay.
This is something that clients usually do when they do a ground floor extension,
Yeah.
and they themselves have bedrooms on the upper floors.
Understood.
And they benefit from that.
Yeah.
Whereas my client is not actually likely to benefit from this view, and it's done, as a gesture of kindness towards the upper neighbours.
Yeah. Thank you. And sorry, Chairman, could I just quickly ask Mr. England, are you one of the neighbours who has a view over the sort of down onto the shed? Is that right?
Yes,
or
I
the
do.
outbuilding?
Yes, I'm on the top floor.
Yeah.
Obviously, others will get
Yeah.
a bigger impact view than I will. Yeah.
Understood. And if we were minded to grant, stealing my colleague's question here, but if we were minded to grant, are there sort of particular conditions which you think would ameliorate the situation for you?
Well, I wasn't thinking of that originally, but obviously the green roof, because I'm an architect and as well, and I know that will need a lot of upkeep. You can't just put it on there. It's not like a brown roof which you let seed itself. You have to irrigate it in dry weather. I don't know how practical that will be. Obviously, the objections from the church, the access to the wall, you need to be further away. And I can't see how you can take that sort of building up to the boundary fence, to the adjoining garden. It's just, there will be no access. You can't upkeep either side.
Yeah.
So there aren't many conditions I notice in this report. There's also factually it refers to in the bit at the end actually referring to it being a conservation area, and obviously it isn't. So there are some inaccuracies.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
To the applicant, I'm concerned about how much have you negotiated with the objectors as to how much room they actually need to maintain what is actually a historic wall? All right, because it's a significant wall. It's a fragile wall and it will need maintenance. So is there any way we can get some provision if this was minded to be granted that this has to be built in? Looking at you, Chair.
Well, I think that would be a question
I'm
for
just
officers
wondering
rather
if you hadn't discussed it.
Yeah.
It is a concern.
I think, Ms Kerr, do you have any point to make about that? I mean,
Could you speak into the mic, sorry?
Sorry, yes, the gap that we gave was our provision for it.
Well, I'm concerned it's a historic wall. It's going to need maintenance. It's a fragile wall.
Okay.
So there's going to have to be something about them having access. Is there enough space for them to be able to do the necessary works to secure the wall? And have you had that discussion with the
No, we haven't.
with the objectors?
No, we haven't. That is our proposal as per the application.
Thank you. Could I ask the objectors whether you have actually asked the applicant for a meeting to discuss this?
No, we haven't yet, but obviously this is one of the main things for us is the fact that we have got long-term plans to restore the wall, and our architect, who is a specialist in church conservation, is adamant that this requires more than 2 feet. I mean, you could barely fit much of anything through 2 feet.
If I could just make a statement on this. So that the current wall is, the current shed is slightly closer, is in this case immaterial. The Heritage and Ecology Committee was only formed a couple of years ago by a number of people concerned about the upkeep of the area. There has been damage to the wall in development over on that side by 106 previously, and the advice that we have, and we're currently applying to, among other bodies, the Chelsea Society and the Heritage Council, to restore the wall. So to date, the issue of serious maintenance, the maintenance that's required, has not come up. So we would be very concerned about granting this without sufficient consideration of, first of all, the historic wall and its needs for further maintenance, and of course the ecology, which is a very important part of the Chelsea green. I'm trying to remember the name of it. We're part of the bee corridor. We have pollinators that are particularly significant, and anything that affects that fragile ecosystem will certainly be of concern. So we'd urge serious consideration of our situation.
So I would be interested to know what distance they do require if they want it, and we could accommodate that.
No, I'm sorry.
Is that not?
I'm sorry. You're not able to ask us questions. Sorry, that's not the way in which this works. Aaron, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a question to the objectors, basically. Are you happy if that wall is restored to a proper condition?
Can I just say it's a little bit more complicated than that. The wall has got timber cladding on it, on the 106 side. And obviously my fellow objectors here have pointed out the distance that you need to work on that properly with the footings could well need to be partially rebuilt because it's been lowered.
Yeah, our advice is that we need 2 meters space to restore it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Any other questions? No, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So, colleagues, our questions to officers. I mean, I'll go first, actually, pursuing the point about the wall. I mean, is it reasonable to expect a degree of distance between the wall which is listed and the structure, or how do we see that issue which has been raised?
The difficulty is that planning permission wouldn't be required to put a timber fence or a means of enclosure to a height of 2 metres right up against that wall. So it is a civil matter, allowing access and so on, but although the wall is listed, it wouldn't preclude someone doing something within 2 metres of that wall. There's no planning way of stopping that happening. So unfortunately, in town planning terms, we wouldn't be able to refuse this based on that 60 centimetres to the wall.
Okay. Colleagues, any other questions? Tom, just quickly. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I mean, hopefully, the applicant seemed like she was open to discussing that distance. So hopefully that can be resolved, and I don't know if it's worth putting up on an informative to encourage those discussions to take place. Moving on, though, I just had a couple of other things. An archaeology condition was suggested in the comments, which I don't know what the details would be, but something around requiring, if anything was discovered during the excavations, or to make sure the excavations were done in a way so as not to damage any potential discoveries. Is there anything we could put on that?
I think we could add, similarly to an unexpected contamination condition, we could have an unexpected archaeology condition. I would hope that on the degree of excavation involved, just the fact that it probably will be a ground slab, that wouldn't be necessary, and we wouldn't have many findings, but they could just present that within a statement as part of it. I don't have an objection to something similar to that.
I think that would be good. It's certainly been a learning experience for me reading all about history of the Moravian Church and St Thomas More. Anyway, and the other one is on the green roof. Could we just maybe add that it's well maintained? That was something mentioned by the objectors.
Yes, you could add either an informative to state that, or you could potentially ask for details of the green roof to be submitted and approved in writing. Either or would be reasonable.
Yes. I don't know which of those you think would be more
Yes, I
reasonable.
mean, I think we have a "and so maintained" condition that we use from time to time.
Yes, absolutely.
Could something like that be formulated, maybe?
Yeah, so a condition requiring a green roof to be installed and so maintained.
Yes. I mean, I think colleagues, Linda, do you have a quick point? Linda, do you want to?
It's about the distance between the wall and the proposed shed. I mean, I presume there'll be protections so that the people will be able to go there, that there wouldn't be growth on it, but actually it's the distance between the shed and just to enable work to be done, because it doesn't seem to be very big, the indication.
Yeah, through you, Chairman.
Just actually to do anything structural to it. Is there anything that can be done?
Well, the planning permission is seeking a 60 centimetre gap. So that's what we're considering, and there's no basis for us to refuse it on the fact that it's too close to the wall for civil reasons and for maintenance purposes, because it's not attached to that wall either, so no listed building consent is required.
Is the wall actually listed?
Yes.
No, I think Linda, I think Mrs. Ray is definitely right about this. This is what's in front of us. I think we need to make a decision on this. I think the fundamental issue here is that the proposal. I know these garden offices often are unpopular things, but what is proposed, it's in planning terms, I don't think it's not a big enough structure for considerations relating to the impact on the wall and these sort of things to kind of kick in. So it's too modest a proposed building, and of course its use is ancillary to the property it's related to. If somebody attempted to create a new home out of this large office, that would require planning permission. But what's proposed seems to me to just be ancillary, and on that basis, that there's quite limited amount we can do. I think my colleagues actually, by proposing an archaeology condition, and also talking about the green roof, and that the details of that need to be specified and it needs to be maintained in a way that keeps it looking reasonable. I think that, personally, colleagues, I think that represents as far as we can actually go on this, really. I don't think that we can do more. So on that basis, with those suggested 2 extra conditions, I think we should make a decision. So the recommendation is to grant.
May I say something before the decision?
Yes, just quickly. Mo, please.
Thank you. I didn't ask any questions because this is a regular thing to us. People have the right to extend, dig basements, build on top of the roofs, and this is 2.4, building something. This is 2.4. If you want to walk into a room, you want to have a head height to walk so you can move safely. This is the main reason I didn't ask any question. I don't have any problem. I agree with your conditions. I just wanted to explain. I was quiet because I was satisfied with the application. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is to grant with the additional conditions that I've just explained. So can I see those in favour, please, of granting? Those against? Okay, so that's granted by 4 votes to 1. Councillor Wade voted against. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Can we now move on to consider the application at 49 Cathcart Road? Thank you, Fiona.
That's
See
me
you
again. Thank you very much. I'd just like to draw members' attention again to the addendum report because the applicant submitted a letter to try and address some of the objections received. So planning permission at this property is sought for a new basement level, the demolition of the existing double garage and new gates and a new wall to the front. This is another resubmission of one that was granted back in 2017. So just turning to the images, we have an existing photo of the front elevation and you can see the double garage there. And we have a floor plan which shows the extent of the basement level proposed at 50%. Also have a front elevation as existing, and then you can see the proposed in relation to that with the new vehicular entrance gates and the new wall proposed. I have nothing further to add to my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we've got speakers registered here. I think we have Caroline Ashby and I think Marilyn Kona. Are you with us? Yep, thank you very much indeed. So please, when you're ready, you've seen how we do this. You've got up to 3 minutes. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. I'm a resident of 35 Redcliffe Gardens, and with my 2 neighbours, Carol Ashby and Alex Irvine Fortescue, object to this development on the following grounds. Number 1, in 1964, conditional planning permission was granted to construct 2 garages in our rear garden. It stated that the garages could not be used for any other purpose. I quote, "Any other use of the garages would be prejudicial to the amenities of the residential buildings of the area generally." Now, the relevant document is included in your officer's packs. I have liaised with the Boltons Association, who have consistently opposed this application. Their chairman, Calvin Jackson, has written the following. The 1960s planning approval for the present 2 garage blocks stipulated that such approval was strictly for the erection of 2 garages and nothing else. It is submitted that when the planning permission considers this evening whether to grant planning approval for a far larger block with no garage but incorporating subterranean development in the part of the block adjoining 49 Cathcart Road and only 1 garage in the other part of the block, it should turn its mind specifically to considering the respective arguments for and against overruling the 60s planning condition. It is further submitted that the Planning Committee should provide the reasons for its considered decision one way or another. The expectation of affected neighbours has always been that in line with the 1960s planning condition, the present garages would remain in place indefinitely. End of quote. Number 2, the vastly increased height of the new dwelling will block the lovely tree-bedecked view looking from Cathcart Road through to Fawcett Street, thus further degrading our beautiful neighbourhood. It'll be like removing a lung. The effect on the rear basement flat 35B of raising the roof level extensively would be to reduce light radically, and multiple windows would infringe on privacy unbearably. 4, building works would be conducted only a few meters from the front door of 35B, making life intolerable. 5, approval will result in the loss of 2 off-street parking spaces, putting further pressure on rear on-street parking. 6, ignoring the 60s planning condition which set a dangerous precedent. What is there to stop raising the roof of the block 3 floors or higher in the future? This is not a resubmission of the previous planning permission. It is a much larger development, and I reiterate that the initial planning permission was conditional to the use of the garages not changing. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So can I ask, I think the agent and architect are there. Please, would you like to introduce yourselves if there are several of you?
So I'm Victoria Saveka, the agent on the application.
Okay.
I'm Rinaldo Rustico, the architect.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. So between you, you also have 3 minutes. So please, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Good evening, Chair, councillors, officers, and those present here and joining us online. As mentioned previously, my name is Victoria Saveka, and I'm the agent for this application representing Mr. and Ms. Foresti, who are the applicants. As you've noted, Mr. Foresti and our architect, Mr. Rustico, are here today and will be able to answer your queries. This application seeks to provide the additional accommodation for the existing family dwelling by way of a single-story basement extension and replacement side extension. One internal garage space will be retained for off-street car parking, and one new on-street car parking space will be provided as a result of reinstatement of part of the curb. The applicant has already commenced Section 106 agreement process with the council's legal team to cover the costs for reinstatement of the curb and application for alteration of traffic management order to provide the additional parking space. As set out earlier this evening by the officer, this application is a resubmission of a planning application that was considered by the committee and approved on 10th of November 2017. To be absolutely clear, the application before the committee today does not propose any changes over and above what has been previously considered acceptable and approved by the council. The applicant was simply unable to commence the works due to the constraints imposed by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The basement extension will be set below ground level. The replacement side extension will be subservient to the main building and has been carefully designed with a sloping roof and obscure glazed fixed shut dormers windows to ensure that amenity of the neighboring residents, including those present today, is preserved. The scale of the side extension will not result in any reduction in the gap between Cathcart Road and Radcliffe Gardens. The design of the extension itself will be in keeping with other developments in the area and will preserve the character and appearance of the Bolton's conservation area. Finally, with regards to basement construction process, prior to expiry of the 2017 consent, a construction traffic management plan was submitted to the council and approved as part of discharge of pre-commencement conditions. This CTMP was discussed and agreed with the neighboring residents during that application. The applicant will resubmit this agreed CTMP when discharging pre-commencement conditions if the committee, of course, is minded to grant the planning permission this evening. So considering all the above, I trust the councillors will review the application and recommend it's granted properly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions? Mo.
I would like the applicant and your agents to comment on the legality of the document the object has presented, the old 1960s application.
Sure. I think the council's legal side and planning officers will be able to comment similarly. There was a consent granted for erection of garages, but this application would supersede that consent. We are able to submit an application for any plot of land for some sort of development, and it has to be considered on its own merits.
Linda?
Yes, I think that there's a lot of concern about the gap, because at the moment, with the garages being the height that they are at the moment, it does achieve a gap. And I think that the borough does like to have those gaps which actually define different types of architecture and different vistas. It's repeated throughout the objectors' comments, and it's clearly something that they're concerned about and is seen from different parts of that area. And so was there no way that this could have been done differently, do you think? That it could have been, it's clearly an issue. Was there no way that it could have been designed differently?
If I pick up first, and my colleague Ronaldo can answer on design. If you view the submitted drawings, design has been quite careful to keep a sloped roof towards the neighbouring residence, 35 Radcliffe Gardens, and then the highest point towards the main dwelling. It still sits very much in a similar scale as the existing garages. The increase is not significant at all. It's not a single-story increase. It's just about a meter to a part of that extension. The gap is of quite a significant size, and you're absolutely right. The planning policy safeguards against it. And when viewed from the street, the proportions will be similar, and the gap will not be altered. We're not coming closer to the property. We're slightly increasing the height, but it is very modest increase comparing to the scale of the two properties. There would be no change in view when looking at from Fawcett Road, towards the Cathcart Road.
Could I possibly ask the same question of the objectors about your view of the gap?
It's a significant raising of the height of the fascia in the front of the garage. It's significant, and as far as the community in Cathcart Road feels that they will not have the same view going down through to Fawcett Street by any means. It'll be blocked. It will not flow through. At the moment, we have two unremarkable, low garages which do not obstruct your view and allow you to see the green, the trees, the ivy, etc., flowing down towards Fawcett Street, and that will be obstructed.
Thank you.
Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just to the applicants, I wanted to, excuse me, could you give a bit more information about the gate? Will it be, I think it's going to be an opaque gate, is that correct?
Yes, it will be. You'll note in the report a condition is suggested to approve the detailed design of the gate as part of conditions.
Okay, so well, there might be something I raised with officers, but I generally think, and there's something I've discussed with officers before, that it's the introduction of opaque gates in that area, Gilson Road has seen a few of them, is unfortunate. Would you object at all to having a condition around the gate being more like the traditional fencing, so you have, so it's open to the street, you can see through it, rather than that sort of opaque gate that blocks the residents off from the street?
We're open to discussing it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And then just to Ms. Kuzner, bearing in mind that you'll understand that we do have to take into account the permission that was already granted, even though it has elapsed, and that is a very significant consideration for that. for us. Bearing that in mind, are there any conditions, if we were to grant, which you think would improve the situation?
Well, first of all, we'd want to lower the parapet wall of the fascia in the front. And we would really like to see it remain garages. It's not just a reinstatement of exactly the same plan. If you look at the plans of the previous one and the ones now, it's a larger development. It's a bigger block. And I will say that when your planning officers were asked the same question about the legality of the 1964 conditions, it was brushed off. And I was not able to reply to it because I could only talk when I was asked a question. But it was brushed off by the man saying, times have changed and things are different. Now, that's not an answer.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Good. Arian, did you have a question or?
Yeah, question to the applicant. In terms of the height from the existing garage, how tall is your proposed building would be?
At the boundary with Ratcliffe Gardens, there's no change in height. So that remains at 2.56 meters. And at the side that's closest to the boundary, so where the extension will connect with the main dwelling, it's 3.57 meters, which will be a meter increase compared to the existing.
1 meter increase?
Yes.
So that
It may be helpful, if possible, to see a section drawing, if at all possible. That explains it well.
So,
Unfortunately, I don't have one on the PowerPoint, but within your pack there are.
yeah, I
section
tried
drawings.
to look at it, but I couldn't.
So you will see from the section that the part of the dwelling that's closest to Ratcliffe Gardens, there's a sloping roof behind that parapet. It's not a solid height throughout, as you can see in the parapet. The parapet is retained to address the street scene considerations, and the roof behind it, which is sloping, addresses the amenity concerns.
So is that height, is that standard across behind the building, or is there a slope?
There is a slope behind the parapet wall that's closest to the 35 Ratcliffe Gardens.
Right, so that wouldn't object the view of the residents that's looking at the green space?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that last part.
Would the height object the view towards the green space from the opposite where the objectors?
You would very much retain the view. I think, as you can see from this elevation, you still very well see the greenery behind.
Right. All right, thank you very much.
Good. Okay, so, well, thank you very much indeed for that. So our turn to ask questions to officers. Actually, I'll start off. Mrs. Ray, can you address this issue that there's obviously documents relating to 1960s permission? Can we address that issue, which obviously has been raised by objectors?
Yes, absolutely. It's a condition that we would even apply now if someone applied for a new garage for it to be retained as parking, and it's to protect residential amenities so that it can't be used for something else, even like a storage facility or an office use where people would be coming and going. Equally, it's there to make sure that there's enough parking. And our requirements since 1960 have changed significantly, as Councillor Bennett alluded to on a previous application when we were talking about bike storage and the need for that. So we actually discourage an over-provision of parking now, which is potentially why you felt brushed off at the previous meeting and dismissed that times had changed. It's that we're probably referring to. We're encouraging walkable neighbourhoods and green modes of transport. So that's where the change has come from.
Okay, all right. I understand. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any other points? Mo and then Linda.
Does the borough policy on gaps apply in this instance? Is it part of the appraisal for the area?
I haven't actually checked. In the report, it doesn't refer to it because we've still got a single-storey building going back. So if I turn to the images on the screen, it may be helpful. There is a difference in height, but for the purposes of the views, gaps and vistas policy, the change is we would consider to be very minor, and wouldn't sort of engage that policy to such a degree that it would be harmful to the conservation area. So officers are satisfied that that view is adequately maintained even with the slight increase in height.
Thank you.
The old condition attached, just to for clarification, the old condition attached to 1960s application. So does that mean it's invalid?
No, not necessarily. It just means planning permission is required. So if there was no condition on the garage, they wouldn't need planning permission to change it to an office or something ancillary to that main house. So they wouldn't actually need consent to do it. It would be permitted development. But because that condition is there, we've retained control, if you like, over what it can be changed to. So it needs to remain as residential parking unless we give permission for something else. So this is an application for planning permission for a change away from that. So if planning permission is granted, like it was in 2017, that condition effectively falls away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just finally, before we move to a vote, if we were minded to grant this, we could presumably add a condition stating that the gate, the point that Councillor Bennett made, that was a gate that you could in effect see through. It wasn't a sort of solid structure. That would be something that we could make that subject to a condition, couldn't we?
Absolutely, and I think that would be an improvement over the previous thing. We could just edit condition 12 if you were minded to.
So that would be, okay, so in effect it would be sort of informally within, okay, it'd be noted in the minutes, but informally we would note that condition 12, there was an expectation that would be something, a traditional railings type of gate, not a solid structure.
Yeah, I think we could include something like the details of the railing and we can make a note in some way that it has to have a view through.
Okay, colleagues, I think that's something that officers could deal with. That's a kind of level of detail that I think it's sensible to delegate. Okay, very good. So we have in front of us the application. Obviously heard the discussion and the point just made there. So the recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? Those against? Okay, so that's carried by 4 votes to 1. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mo. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we'll just take a couple of minutes break just at the moment. Thank you. Okay, I think, thank you very much. So I think we can restart in a moment. Word has reached me that in the football, Scotland have equalised against Croatia, so it's now 1-1. In the other game, England seem to be leading the Czech Republic 1-0. Okay, so if we can now move on, please. I think we're all here, yes. Can we now turn to 42 Caulfield Gardens? And I think, Fiona, that's you for the final time.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So planning permission is sought for a new rooftop extension and a new air conditioning unit inside an enclosure at this property. So on the screen now is a site photo which shows the property outside in yellow. To the west it adjoins the Ambassadors Hotel, and to the east number 43. You can see the existing roof from these photos has lots of roof lights, maintenance hatches, other bits and pieces. There is also an existing extension next door at number 43. This is the proposed plan, which shows the position of the extension and the new air conditioning unit. And in elevation, we can see the new extension in relation to that next door. So it's been designed to match the neighbouring property in terms of bulk and size. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Any questions about this? Anybody? So I mean, these are very substantial buildings. So to actually the number of views of the roof and of the top of the building must be very limited, really. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure anyone can actually see the extension next door at 43.
Right.
Especially not from the street.
No. Okay. Right. Colleagues, Linda.
I have two questions. I couldn't see whether or not there were any other roof extensions along that line of buildings, because you've got the Ambassadors on the corner, but from 42 to 50, it's quite hard to see from that picture, but I mean, do you...
Yeah, absolutely. There's only one, as far as I'm aware, which is directly next door. So this one is going to match the one next door in all respects in terms of size and footprint. But further down, there's other sort of additions to the roofs, hatches and roof lights and so on. But the only other comparable extension is directly next door.
Okay, and the other thing is, I understood that some of the objections were that the top would prevent exit in fire. I understood that roof exits weren't a recommended route.
Yeah,
therefore that's not really...
Yeah, your summary is correct. We consulted our building control team just to double check that after it was raised by objectors, and they've said that we can't enforce that arrangement because it's access over somebody else's property and so on. But they did, nevertheless, the applicants did actually make a change to the drawings to maintain a passage, but whether or not, it just can't be enforced by us, that second means of escape.
Thank you.
Any other points? No. Okay, in that case, recommendation is to grant permission set out in the report with the recommended conditions. Can I see those in favour, please? Okay, so that's granted. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If we can now turn to the North Pack. Thank you, Mrs. Ray. If we can now turn to the North Pack, and I think, Mr. Taylor, you're going to take us to Hippodrome Mews first.
Yes, Chairman. The slide I'm showing there shows the front elevation of the building, so it's number 20 on the left-hand side of the image that we're looking at there. and that's the proposed front elevation. So that's the existing and that's the proposed. So you can see there that not an awful lot's changing on the front elevation, that the garage doors are now being retained, as you'll have seen in the report, as an amendment to the application. That's the existing side elevation. Now, it's important in terms of the side elevation to note that there's an existing window at second floor level on the side elevation as existing. There's a very small one down at ground level, but I think it's the larger one above that you need to focus on. And then that's the proposed side elevation. So that's the existing and that's the proposed. You'll see there that there are 3 new windows now proposed for the side. 2 of them are directly beneath the position of the existing window, and then there's one over to the side. The pack contains a number of photographs very helpfully sent in by the neighbour at number 19. And you can see there that the proximity between the buildings obviously lends to sort of overlooking from any window. As soon as you put a window in there, that there is some overlooking. What you can see, from that photograph, is the way that to insert a new window beneath the existing one, obviously it provides a potential new angle of overlooking. On the other hand, there's no privacy existing because it is already overlooked. I'll come back to that when I'm summing up at the end. That's the proposed plan. I just chose the first floor plan there. And you'll see that the new window is at the bottom of the slide. So the proposal internally is to form a new room. At the moment, there's a bathroom there. They would shift the bathroom across to create an ensuite in the top left, and then create a new single bedroom at the lower part of the image. So essentially, obviously, you've seen the objections. Privacy, I think, is the key issue. And there are really only 2 ways to look at it, in my opinion. I mean, one is to say that the existing situation means that you would need to draw curtains in order to achieve privacy. And that situation wouldn't change with the proposed new windows. That there would still be a need to be private, but it wouldn't really change. The other way to look at it is to say that every new window would add to the potential of overlooking, and that there would be a difference between being overlooked from one window and being overlooked by 4 windows. It can only be one way or the other. That's the last slide, Chairman.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions? What do people think about this? Questions to Mr. Taylor? Actually, Tom and then Mo. Tom first, yeah.
What, Mr. Taylor, what room is currently overlooking property? So the existing window, is that a bathroom or a bedroom, or just trying to think of how frequently people would look out that window?
The existing top window is I'm not sure if we have the plan for that. Right, I'm afraid I don't have an existing plan either in the pack or in the presentation to show what the room is there.
Okay. But I suppose they could change it without planning, couldn't they? If it was a bathroom,
They could change it in any event, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mo.
Yeah, Mr. Taylor, privacy. What could we do to improve and protect the neighbors? Do we need to do more?
Well, I think that's why I sort of focus a little bit on what the new room was. In other words, it's a bedroom, for example, at first floor level. Because the remedy in many situations would be to require obscured glazing, which obviously would remove overlooking. The trouble is it's a bedroom, so if it was a bathroom, then maybe obscured glazing would be a reasonable condition. But as a bedroom, I mean, I think my advice would be that would be rather negating the whole purpose of the proposal. So it's sort of obscured glazing in a bedroom might not be too good a condition.
Okay. Linda, do you want to?
Mr. Taylor, how close are the two buildings?
They're about 8 metres apart.
So that it's marginal, isn't it, as to...
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, there are plenty of mews, for example, in the borough where windows will face each other across the mews at a distance of 7 or 8 or 9 metres. So that sort of distance is not unusual. I think obviously what the neighbours are saying here is that at the moment they're not facing a window apart from at the upper level. And I think for the neighbours it's the insertion of windows beneath that makes all the difference to them. But the distances themselves are not incomparable to many other situations, in particular mews.
And is the land directly outside the building there, or is at least part of it owned by the applicant? So they could go and stand in their yard and look into the window?
Well, at the lower level, it's garden. So there is nothing to prevent somebody standing down at the lower level at the moment.
The garden belonging to the applicant, for number 20.
Yeah, that's the bit I wanted to. In the photographs, you can see clearly that it is the photographs that the objectors have sent in. You can see clearly it's garden at the lower level. What I'm just not sure of is whose garden that is.
There's no Google Street View on Hippodrome Mews, so I couldn't.
Sorry, Chairman.
No, in fact, actually, I think that's past the mews. In other words, that's nobody's garden. Because in one of the photographs, you can see the tops of cars parked there.
Actually, Martin, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Taylor got there in the end. That looks like it's part of the mews, and there are photographs showing cars parked there. They've got a partial green wall at the bottom of their building, but the garden is actually to the rear.
Okay.
So this elevation that you see is effectively facing onto the public mews.
Right, okay, so there are public views into that. The window we saw from the objector, that room, there are public views into there already.
From the plan in the pack and the photographs, that's my interpretation of it, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can see a bit more. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So, we need to make a decision. It's a tricky one. I think probably on balance, I suspect, you know, mews properties, I think that there has to be an acceptance that they will be closer together than in other locations. But I think I think the idea that we might say that there was a negative impact on amenity, which was actually contrary to policy, and therefore there might be a reason to refuse this. I think that would have some credibility as an argument. I think the decision is down to us. So I think what we should do is I think we should take a vote. So The application, obviously the recommendation is to grant. So can I see those in favour of granting, please? Okay. All right. So that's granted, in fact, unanimously. Okay. Thank you. Now, Mr. Taylor, can we now move on to the application Notting Hill Gate, which is the condition application?
Yes, so you can see that this is the application pursuant to condition 18 of the Planning Permission relating to the travel plan. You'll have noticed from the letters of representation that obviously people are concerned about a number of aspects of it. Most of those concerns do relate to the servicing and delivery plan and the taxi plan that actually come under other conditions which are yet to be considered. So this is purely the travel plan. The whole travel plan is included in the pack, so there's probably not much point to me saying too much about it. Suffice to say that the travel plan is to do with how people travel to the hotel, staff or guests, and how they would travel to and from the hotel during the day or during the evening. So it's all to do with sort of managing how people would travel, encouraging sustainable modes of travel, so encouraging walking, encouraging cycling, encouraging public transport. Part of the travel plan would include having somebody within the hotel team on site to advise people as to how they can get to places locally, so that's a sort of quite an important role within the travel plan. So that there would be a travel plan coordinator, there would be travel information on notice boards, and there'd be encouraging for the car sharing scheme for staff and many other aspects. So that the whole plan is there, and it's a good travel plan in response to the reasons behind the condition.
Thank you. Yes, I think, thank you for that. No, I think reading the comments that have been made, I think they tend to relate to other conditions, frankly. Linda, do you want to ask something?
Mr. Taylor, most people seem to be complaining about the drop-off of the taxis at the back. I presumed, looking at the plan, I didn't really understand how the hotel's going to work, so forgive me. I presumed that the rear access was designed for deliveries and facilitating the services of the hotel, proposed hotel. So why are the taxis supposed to be allowed to go there? Why don't they go to the front?
Simply that isn't part of this application, because there's a separate condition relating to the taxi and coach management plan.
I'm just asking because I can see that...
I wouldn't want to second guess the taxi plan yet, because I haven't seen it.
It's just I can see that if you live in this area, you could probably say deliveries would be fine between certain hours, but actually you can't predict when taxis turn up.
That would probably be true, yeah.
So that's my thing.
Thanks. Two questions. One, I was just wondering if you did a previous committee ask that this condition come back to committee, and if so, do you know why? Was there anything in particular that they were concerned about? And then the second question is, I haven't seen, though there could be something. I think this should include plans for staff travel, but I haven't seen anything about providing any cycle storage for staff, which would seem a sensible thing. They do talk about staff wanting to travel by bike, and they talk about Santander docking stations, but it'd be good, I think, to have some on-site cycle storage as well.
Yes, there actually is on-site cycle storage, so that's incorporated within the planning permission. I can't remember how many spaces offhand, but it is in there. In terms of the bringing the case to committee, I mean, that there are 9 objections. So by definition, with 9 objections, it comes before the committee. There was no particular request from previous committee.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, in that case, I think we can move to a vote. So the recommendation is that we approve the submitted details to discharge the condition. Can I see those in favour, please? So that's agreed unanimously. Thank you very much. We can now turn to 20 Ladbroke Gardens, please.
Right, so this is an application basically to extend the existing lower ground floor of the property. I just included that slide there to give you the flavour of the property, sort of classic mid-Victorian property in Ladbroke Gardens. The slide I'm showing there shows you the existing lower ground floor at the top and then the existing basement plan at the bottom. And hatched in red are the areas where there would be excavation to form the extension to the existing basement. And those are the plans of the proposed basement. So if you compare it with that, you can see that it's extended rearwards, not forwards. The forward part of the building doesn't have a basement and there's no extension proposed forward. So it's purely a rearwards extension. And so you can see there in the section, that's the extension extended rearwards to the main rear wall of the building with a light well behind it. And then in section, that's just across the building. I'd point out there, you can see from the dotted line identified by existing basement floor level, that shows the depth of excavation to lower the floor of the existing basement. But that doesn't constitute a new basement. It's simply increasing the floor to ceiling height within the existing basement. So that doesn't trigger policy CL7. And that was the last slide.
Any questions relating to that? Tom?
Yeah. I just had one. I didn't have the quote to hand, but I seem to remember there some of the objections said that there were stability issues that went above and beyond sort of normal stability issues on this street. I can't remember exactly what they said about it, but there's been sort of subsidence in the past. So yeah, and the sort of walls shake when lorries come down. Is that something which has been considered, and would it make sense to put on sort of additional checks on stability and vibrations? I know we do that sometimes for listed buildings and things for this application.
I mean, as far as the Town and Country Planning Act is concerned, there isn't, as I say, policy CL7 doesn't apply, so that there isn't actually a planning policy that comes to bear on this application that sort of enters the territory of structural stability. That's not to say it isn't a material consideration. Clearly the neighbours have raised it as a concern. The actual depth, the additional depth that they'd be excavating to is under 700 millimetres. So in other words, it's not even a metre. I mean, the building regulations, I think, would take care of that without the planning system really sort of coming into it. The Party Wall Act would also apply. And obviously, you know, the engineers concerned with the Party Wall Act would discuss that in great detail. I mean, for planning purposes, it's a material consideration, but it's not a key consideration for this application.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I think Mr. Taylor's right about that. It's the extent of the excavation is really rather modest. Okay. Any other points? No. Okay. In that case, the recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? Okay, so that's granted. Thank you very much. Now, if we turn to, now it's 2 pairs of applications relating to Leighton House. Taylor.
That's right. There are two pairs, planning permission and listed building consent in each case. The first application is the erection of an acoustic enclosure to enclose plants on the east side of the pairing wing. So the elevation I'm showing you there is obviously the side elevation of Leighton House. And if you look towards the left-hand side of the image, you'll see that there's a circular window high up, and then there's a largely blank wall running down with some windows at sort of higher first floor level. The proposed position for the acoustic enclosure is at ground level beneath those windows at the bottom of the flank. In drawing terms, you can see there the windows just above the acoustic enclosure, positioned at ground level beneath them. The acoustic enclosure in itself is pretty much what you'd expect, I think, for an acoustic enclosure. The key point here is that it wouldn't be visible from outside the grounds of the building. The slide I'm showing you there, if you look directly at the centre, you can see that there's a fence, and then the blue and green dotted lines show that if one was walking along the pavement, you couldn't see over the fence, and you couldn't see the acoustic enclosure behind it. Obviously, Leighton House is an important building. It does need to be air-conditioned. There would be no better place to put an acoustic enclosure than at ground floor level against the flank wall of the building in that position. So that's planning permission and listed building consent.
Any questions at all? No.
Sorry,
Tom, go on.
No, I was just wondering, I know it's an acoustic enclosure, and so it looks like an acoustic enclosure, but on such an important building, couldn't some effort be made to put something around the acoustic enclosure which doesn't look like an acoustic enclosure and looks more in keeping with Leighton House?
I think probably two problems there. Firstly, the acoustic enclosure, obviously acoustics is its purpose, but it also has to allow air to come in and air to circulate. So enclosing the acoustic enclosure in something else would interfere with that airflow, I would imagine. Probably wouldn't be a good idea in terms of that. In terms of the need for that, if it was in a more visible position, then I'm sure that our conservation officers would have been focusing on that right at the beginning. But because it's sort of hidden from view on the side, it's not something that members of the public or even people attending the museum would ever see.
So even people, that was going to be my next question, even people attending the museum won't see it, it's really hidden out the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, so for this first application, we have planning permission for this enclosure. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? So that's granted. And then we have listed building consent, again, for this acoustic enclosure. Can I see those in favour of that, please? So listed building consent is granted. And then moving on, Mr. Taylor, I think there's a further application, isn't there?
That's right. So this is the second pair of applications, planning permission and listed building consent again. In section, the image I'm showing there, you can see, if you look at the sort of domed roof lights, or domed roof towards the right-hand side of the image, immediately to its left, you can see the proposed air conditioning unit. So it's sort of sandwiched between the central part of the building and that circular dome. If you then look at the elevation, it's the dome that you're just looking at isn't the large one to the left-hand side, but immediately to its right, it's sort of seen against the roof, roughly left of centre. You can see the smaller dome, so the unit would be hidden behind that.
Any questions about that? No. Okay. Again, quite tucked away and inconspicuous in what is obviously an extremely large and important building. Okay, so recommendation here is for the planning permission is to grant. I see those in favour, please. So that's granted. And for this planning permission, there's also listed building consent. Recommendation is to grant that. Can I see those in favour, please? Okay. Councillor Wade, were you in favour of listed building consent, or did you vote in favour of the listed building consent? Yeah, so that's unanimous. Okay, very good. Thank you very much indeed. So can we now move on to Oxford Gardens, an ultimate application?
Okay, the first image I'm showing you there shows the ground floor plan of the existing primary school, and indicated in red are the parts that would be removed under the proposal. You'll see that there would be some internal walls removed, and then at the left-hand side of the image, then you'll see that part of the front boundary wall would also be removed. That's the proposed plan, so you can see there that there would be a new reception area formed within the building following removal of those internal walls. And you can see that there's a new sort of external area to the left-hand side with an entrance leading from the pavement. That's the existing school elevation and boundary elevation, and then that's the proposed elevation. So I think that the single biggest change is the increase in extent of railing in the lower image there, in place of the existing wall. That shows the existing boundary wall. You can see there that when the wall was constructed, if you look at the red brick piers and the red brick part of the wall, originally it would have had railings for half the height of the wall, and at some point subsequently that was then filled in with the stock brick that you see. The change from wall to railing is one that in planning terms is effectively neutral, I would suggest. Even if it was found to be harmful, then obviously the school would benefit from the new facilities, and so there would be benefits in functionality terms to outweigh the wall if you did find the wall as a positive feature.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Any comments at all? No. Okay. In that case, recommendation is to grant permission. I see those in favour, please. So that's granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we go to Southern Row.
All right, so the last one for the evening, Octavia House, very simple one. The sort of centre left of the photograph, you can see the existing boundary wall. Octavia House itself is off to just outside the photograph on the left. And it is proposed to erect railings along the boundary, which would give better definition and security to the boundary. And in drawing terms, the top image there shows the existing boundary with the sort of dwarf wall, and the lower image shows the new piers and railings and vehicular gate at the centre.
Any questions at all about this? No. Tom.
Yeah, sorry, the railings are permeable, sort of traditional railings, not opaque.
No, you can see through them. Yeah. Air would travel through them. They're proper railings.
Yeah, just a bit of a bugbear of mine. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Just to say, these last couple of applications, they're coming to committee because the Rhyl Borough we are actually the freeholders / owner of the building. So it's on that basis. I know there are no objections, but that's the reason they are coming to committee. It's been decided that it's appropriate that we deal with the applications in that manner. So the recommendation for this railings at Octavia House, Southern Row, recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? So that's granted. Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you indeed.